We are ready to get our final semi-final match underway here. Maverick is already waiting in the finals to meet the winner of Scruffy versus Xblyzes. Xblyzes earlier reverse swept his opponent with a Quest Rogue, and Scruffy actually ended up defeating Chinoise on the back of a very powerful Rin the First Disciple performance up against a pair of control decks. Bringing you the action, we have Falcone and Derek Brown on the desk. This one could honestly be anybody's game, because Scruffy's Warlock performed very well, particularly against Chinoise's lineup, but Xblyzes' lineup I don't think will have those same weaknesses.
Yeah, with the way it currently stands, you know, Scruffy, I mean, you summed it up pretty well with how you described it beforehand. It wasn't so much a strong Warlock performance as much as it was a strong Rin performance. He got the card that he needed right out the gate, and even within that, there was some chatterings amongst the crowd that maybe he didn't sequence. You're right there, mate. It's not happening. Like, I could go up too.
Continue, please.
As I will continue, there was some chattering amongst the crowd with the pro players saying he could have sequenced his Gul'dan and Seals with the Rin a little bit better to optimize, completely lock Chinoise out of that game. But generally very strong control performances. Whereas, you know, for his opponent, we know that Xblyzes has that Quest Rogue and is very proficient with it as well. So I'd be very unsurprised to see that just being banned away right at the start.
Yeah, it's the Igneous Elemental version as well. I know we've talked about this, I think, both of us independently of one another a little bit throughout this tournament. It's not a list that either of us particularly like, but we can't deny the performance throughout this DreamHack so far.
A lot of the professional players on Twitter are agreeing with you guys. They think the Igneous Elemental list is subpar. Yeah, once in a while that does actually happen. It's really refreshing when it does. No, they think the Igneous Elemental list is strictly worse than the Wax Elemental list. So to see Xblyzes bring a list that much of the professional community agrees is just strictly worse, and doing so well with it, I think speaks volumes about the strength of Quest Rogue in general. And I think also is a reason why we're going to be seeing Quest Rogue getting a balance change tomorrow. All of the minions will instead be transformed into 4/4s instead of 5/5s. Whether that will make a difference remains to be seen. I personally think a lot of the matchups will remain very similar, but
really?
I do. I think that the deck itself is very similar. You can't just say that a -1/-1 debuff on minions is nothing, but I'm hesitant. I think that we, at the Titanar Invitational, will be seeing a bit of Quest Rogue as well. But let's go ahead and take a look at these bans and picks here for Scruffy and Xblyzes and see if any Quest Rogues will be played this time around. For Xblyzes, it is Mage, Paladin, and Warlock, no Rogue. For Scruffy, it is Paladin, Rogue, and Warlock, no Priest.
And in terms of the bans here, at just a quick first glance, it looks like both players have kind of, you know, no one's come out far ahead in terms of strategies thus far. Obviously, Scruffy did not have much choice with his very controlling lineup. Generally, if you're bringing Warlock and Priest, you have to get rid of that Quest Rogue because you're just too vulnerable to a potential sweep. Whereas for Xblyzes, getting rid of that Priest, because, you know, with the aggro mage being a slight underdog against the Priest and the Paladin, the Warlock definitely a little bit closer. It feels like both players just going for the deck they kind of have to ban here. Nothing too fancy occurring thus far.
Something I'm particularly looking forward to in this matchup is actually just seeing Xblyzes cube lock. The vast majority of Warlock decks that we've seen, especially over the last day or so, have been control locks. But this is actually Carnivorous Cube, Doomguard, get him.
Right. And we've seen that would make a lot of difference in these matchups because against the aggro decks, it's generally just control Warlock does slightly better, Cube Lock struggles slightly more. You're still going for the same kind of plan of removing into Doomguards and Voidlords. But against the decks like Control Priest, your game plan just shifts so completely. You're going for the aggro game plan with the control, with the Cube Warlock, and the heal plan with the Control Warlock. And clearly, it didn't feel there for that player that he thought the Cube Lock would be able to take the victory against the Priest, as we've seen that be a matchup that struggles against the Priest more than the Control Warlock.
It's just strange to me that sort of the last tournament of this meta, it's Control Lock that has mostly come out on top. But hey, we may see something amazing from Xblyzes here.
Well, I think a large reason for that is the defensive power of Control Warlock is strictly more than the defensive power of Cube Warlock. And when you have the ability to just use Rin the First Disciple, the Seals, and Azari to destroy your opponent's deck, you don't really need any actual threats. You just need the ability to survive until you can make that happen. But we're going to have to see how this one goes. With a Q block on one side instead of a control lock, things could be very different than we saw in a couple of our previous matchups. But Scruffy versus Xblyzes. Falk, do you have any inclination who's going to take this one?
Xblyzes isn't allowed to play his Quest Rogue, and we've seen him sweep with that, I think, at least twice on stream through this tournament. I gotta say Scruffy.
Derek?
Okay, I like your thinking. This one, it doesn't feel like in the last series, Maverick felt like he was pretty far in the lead. This one, I think it's just going to be coming down to play. And Scruffy, he made a couple of blunders, very small in the last series, that didn't completely lock out his victory in those control mirrors. But overall, I think he's been very on point, very strong player, and I think he's in with a good shot of taking this one.
Yeah, this one I'm honestly not sure about. These are two players that I know less about overall. They both had pretty solid performances in their semifinal, or in their quarterfinal matches, excuse me. So I think this one could be anybody's game, but stick around to find out who will be meeting Maverick in the finals and fighting for their title of champion of the DreamHack HCT Grand Prix. Let's find out right now.
Derek, it's our first and last cast together here. Even our first time on camera together. And you know what? I'm going to enjoy this game for that reason. In addition to the amazing gameplay that we can expect from these two very proficient Hearthstone players. Again, getting to the semifinals of a DreamHack, that's no small feat.
Absolutely. We know that these players have got what it takes to win it. Everybody does. It feels to me at the moment like no matter who takes this, they're going to be struggling against Maverick. But let's have a look at our first game going into it. And my goodness, taking a look at the pick order of this particular series. Obviously, it's a last hero standing tournament, so the deck that you lead off with makes a very large difference indeed, because you've got to consider, do I want to go with the sweeping potential? Do I want to go with the deck that I think is just kind of a throwaway so I can scout out my opponent's strategy and get a stronger counter? But it looks to me here that in terms of the lineup of both of these decks to get things going, Xblyzes has definitely come out on top.
Yeah, well, it's one of the hardest matchups, I think it's safe to say, from across the entire field for the Quest Rogue, having to deal with, to survive against aggro mage whilst completing that quest. Vicious Scalehide becomes one of the most important cards a little bit later on. If he can get that down the turn before dying, and it's never any sooner than that, it's usually the turn before dying, then maybe he can pull ahead and get a win, but it's not going to be easy, especially with Mana Worm on 1, into Glyph on 2, into Counterspell or Explosive Rune on turn 3.
And that's the thing, you said if, I think about 4 times there, and that perfectly illustrates how dire this is for Scruffy. There's so much that has to go right for him to be able to stand up against the pure aggression coming through from Xblyzes. And okay, so Xblyzes has got Mana Worm on 1, that's the best case scenario that you can end up with here, obviously, to push forward a huge amount of damage right at the start. But his follow-up is not especially powerful. He hasn't had Kirin Mage or Arcanologist to really amp up the amount of pressure, and therefore Scruffy going with a turn 3 quest playing here, as was, you know, absolutely correct. I think we see a lot of players going for quest on 1 no matter what, whereas, you know, playing the Firefly, there's very little downside in terms of quest completion because you just complete your quest with the Flame Elementals anyway.
Yeah, unfortunately, the Runes is going to be dealing that 4 damage, and every single point of damage does count and does add up. Just another way that the aggro mage can guarantee the win later on as well is to just stop playing minions and start heading with burn. If the Scalehide has nothing to trade into, then the lifesteal isn't going to go off.
Right. Okay, a very interesting little kind of game of chicken that occurred on that last turn between Scruffy and Xblyzes, where, as I mentioned, the quest was only played on turn 3 after a secret had been played. It was from a glyph, mind you, so no guarantee that it was either Explosive Runes or Counterspell. But Scruffy decided to go for the coin first to make sure there was no chance of his quest being Counterspelled, which is obviously game over on the spot. I wonder if that was the play to go for, though, because he ended up floating a mana. There was no use for that afterwards, and maybe he needed to say to himself, I'm in such a bad spot anyway, I'm so unlikely to be completing the quest here and leading through to a victory, that if it is Counterspell off a glyph here, when he knows I have a coin in hand anyway, do I ever end up winning?
Oh man, that is a depressing thought, but true nonetheless. And I think this is one of the weaknesses of the Ignis Elemental as well itself. If this was a Wax Elemental, it would at least be saving Scruffy some health. But here, they're just sitting there, and it's down to Scruffy to make the trades. Xblyzes isn't going to do that.
I don't know. I think this is not necessarily too bad of a position for the Igneous Elemental because, like you said, it's slow. It's a very slow card to be played here, but a 3-mana 2/3 is kind of good enough given how bad the minions that the mage are playing. It's good enough to stay even on board, which is what you have to do because it's also getting you closer to completing the quest, which is obviously of the absolute utmost importance because with the 2 Igneous Elementals and the Firefly, this is quest completion available right away with just all the Flame Elementals that you're going to be playing down. You are, however, going to need cards like that one.
There he is.
If you're going to be stabilizing in the Vicious Scalehide.
And Scruffy feeling the need to play it immediately, meaning that it will be removed. It can't be bounced if it's played now. And that's 1 out of 2 gone. But he just has to.
What? Why does he have to?
Well, he feels as though he has to anyway. It's going to be healing him for 1 here, 2 unless Xblyzes pings it. No, do you know what?
Okay, so here's the thinking. If he goes for all the elementals... Oh, yeah, sorry, he does have enough. Okay, so we could have played all elementals on this turn, and then next turn you go quest Scalehide. The potential scary part for that is if you don't manage to get a... if there's no minions on your opponent's side of the board. So he's clearly anticipating his opponent just going for not playing any minions and fireballs through to face. But I think you always lose with this game plan anyway, pretty much. By getting rid of your Scalehide here, I don't think that's ever optimistic enough of a plan, because I think with the way it was positioned there for Scruffy... Oh my...
This has just been an impossible game all the way through for Scruffy.
Because there was a counterspell in play.
He's dead now regardless. The second fireball was there.
Yeah.
But... sadly, regardless, I think, of any of Scruffy's moves this game, again, the Mana Worm into Glyph, into Counterspell, Runes, Frostbolt, Fireball. Xblyzes had all of the damage that he could possibly need, and I think, sadly for Scruffy, regardless of his play, he wasn't going to win that one.
Exactly. As I missed there, I was thinking of a line of play that obviously would have been better if there was no Counterspell available there, but he had to fit in a Vanish sometime beforehand because he knew that that spell, given that he tested for Runes, was a counterspell. There was no ability for him to play the quest and get that one done. So, yeah, apologies to Scruffy there. He did the best he could possibly do there in that scenario to try and wrestle things back in his favor. But when the quest strike has a hand like that, Mana Worm in 1, Glyph onto you, as you mentioned, even without the best possible hand with an Arcanologist or Apprentice into Kirin Mage, that's always going to be enough to get the job done.
But yeah, Xblyzes takes the first win of the series and now is up against the Paladin, a renowned aggro mage killer deck.
Oh, yes.
Able to get onto the board very aggressively, very quickly. Again, like with all matchups, it can lose, but it's the obvious counter Q pick for Scruffy here.
Absolutely, and he gets a hand that is not particularly impressive here to get things going. He decides to keep the True Silver Champion because obviously it's one of the few cards you can play that is neither vulnerable to Counterspell or Explosive Runes because it's neither a minion or a spell.
Yep.
And will be able to clear up pretty much every minion that the mage is playing in the early game, or actually literally every minion, because you're likely killing off Life Drinker, Kirin Mage, Sorcerer's Apprentice, something like that. But even then, this starting hand for Xblyzes is pretty disgustingly powerful.
Even without the Mana Worm, Kirin Mage into Secret is just always good. And he gets the better Secret, right? There's a coin in Scruffy's hand, so the Kirin into the Counterspell is a little bit dodgy early on, but Kirin into Explosive Runes. The good thing here is that Scruffy may decide to use the coins first to test for the Counterspell, in which case it's just a waste of the coin. I guess coin into True Silver is not bad, actually.
It's not bad, but Scruffy absolutely has to lock down board control and keep it for the rest of the game if he's going to be able to stand up against this from Xblyzes. And the way it currently stands, yeah, maybe he just can. He's got a lot of damage pushing through here to clear off this board, and is obviously ahead on board for the moment. And even though this Armani Berserker dies to a 2 damage hero power, a 2 mana hero power from his opponent, that's 2 mana used up then.
Scruffy is one of the many players, by the way, that brought the Glass Knight instead of one of the Sound Knight chain gangs in his list. It seems to have been a very very common way of building this deck in this tournament, and it's been working out so far.
Yeah.
As Sound Like Chain Gang is an okay counter to the explosive runes. Yeah, he still takes the damage, but he still does end up with a 2-3 taunt, which is getting in the way of that Blood Mage Thanos. Yeah,
like you said, Glass Knight mainly being included as an anti-Warlock card because anything you can play on 4 that does not die to Hellfire feels pretty good indeed, as Xblyzes is just starting to launch everything he possibly can towards his opponent's face, including this copy of Cinderstorm, which was truly ridiculous in terms of the amount of face damage it was pushing forward.
6 50-50s?
Which
they all went face, right?
Yeah, that's not even good. Like, he would rather have had a couple more going in. It's not the worst case scenario.
There were 2 fireballs in it.
Yeah.
As well.
Okay, yeah, it's pretty good. It's pretty good, but your opponent has the healing from True Silver. They're starting to ramp up a good amount of damage coming through here. You just need to make sure, basically, that you stay alive for a couple of turns, because when that does happen, you will just win.
Yeah, Scruffy's really going to start pushing the pressure now, exactly. With double Argent Commander plus Valenier in his hand, every single turn he has a surprise 4 extra damage to be hitting Xblyzes in the face with. So we've got to be looking at a 2-turn lethal setup coming next turn. Yeah, I think so, if nothing on Scruffy's side of the board is to die. However, Xblyzes pushing the damage into Scruffy's face. Still got a Fireball available. There are top decks to win the game for Xblyzes now. Fireball Frostbolt would do it.
Yeah, and this set up for a potential 2-turn lethal. But the thing is, going for, on this turn, the Arcanologist into Fireball, it doesn't set up lethal, 2-turn lethal any more than Kirin Tormage into Secret Ping did, or because that develops a stronger board, and you're getting a secret in, so it protects you against either the Avenging Wrath if you decide to go for the counter spell, or just a strong minion like Argent Commander. It's more damage to face, which sets up lethal on a following turn anyway with the explosive runes. So I think maybe from Xblyzes, it's worth setting up the potential for 2-turn lethal, because as you mentioned, Frostbolt off the top here is kind of what he needs to be looking for.
Counter spell. Okay, Scruffy has lethal set up. Yeah, with the 4 damage from the Valenier, that is going to do it. 17 damage exactly, if my maths are correct. Yep.
Absolutely, getting the lethal against any contingency of spells. Xblyzes is tremendously close there, and I do have to wonder, on that last turn, if he'd gone for Kirin Tormage and explosive runes, gets a little bit more damage through to face, or maybe even with the counterspell, it prevents the call to arms being played, which is a huge amount of damage that he's mitigating.
I'm also wondering if on the final turn for Xblyzes, maybe he should have just pinged a 1-1, because 4 damage is a common amount of damage that Paladin can come up with.
Very true.
Silver Champion, Valenier, whereas if he did ping a 1-1, then it was 5 damage that was needed, and that could have made all the difference.
Exactly, and this is the kind of breaking points that you need to know if you're going to be taking this series, as Xblyzes does end up taking the loss. Scruffy equalizing it 1-1, and so far, while we've been, discussing maybe some lines that players could have been taking to break the serve, as it were, things have been going as they should be for the most part. Even the aggro mage should beat Quest Rogue. The even Paladin should beat the aggro mage, but now it gets a little bit more complicated with an even Paladin mirror. In Last Hero Standing, it's these mirrors that always seem to completely decide how these series go.
It's vital. Xblyzes couldn't go for the Warlock here, given that it's a cube lock, not a control lock. It means the Paladin is a little bit more of a favorite that way around. And so, yeah, okay, Derek, what do you think? What are the key cards to win this matchup?
So obviously, for the main part, it's the power 4 drops that you're looking for to take this game. It's cards like Call to Arms as a pretty premier option. Yeah. But outside of that, you also need powerful responses. It's not necessarily about having the strongest first threat. It's about having the strongest first threat, that sticks and attacks through to face. Yeah. So cards, for example, like Consecration, which can sometimes flounder in the later stages of the game, as a reactive option, if you know your opponent has coin into Call to Arms, can be very powerful indeed.
Yeah, all of the damage matters as well. Paladin is a deck that can just, trade, deal a little bit of damage here, a little bit of damage there, and then suddenly when you're at 10 health, Avenging Wrath can pretty much kill you when backed up by a weapon. So keeping those health totals as high as possible is a big factor. I believe Chinoy's lost a game earlier because he lost the early game. Yes, he managed to stabilize later on, but he'd taken 20 damage, and so his opponent was just able to surprise him with a lethal later on.
As on this turn, what seemed like a relatively innocuous play from Scruffy was actually an incredibly difficult decision to make, because before the ooze was picked up, I was absolutely looking at a quality trade there and make an extra hero power on that turn, because at a first glance, leaving an Armani Berserker on board feels very scary indeed. It can be buffed up by Blessing of Kings. You can go Call to Arms for a nice wide board with the coin. But against all those contingency plans, Consecration or Equality have both of those covered, because if they go Kings, you play Equality and trade. If they go Call to Arms, you play Consecration and trade against their board.
There's a pretty major difference in these guys' deck lists as well, which may actually make a difference to the matchup. Whereas Scruffy, as we said before, does run a copy of the Glass Knight, Xblyzes does not, but he runs the Lich King.
You find that helps that matchup or hinders it? Because I know actually, when we've been playing this on ladder, I don't play the Lich King and you do.
I hate to say it, it depends on the Death Knight card. Obviously, on turn 8, if the board is somewhat empty, or you know, if your opponent's not ahead on the board, I should say, slamming an 8-mana 8/8 with Taunt always feels good.
Right.
But Death and Decay is insane from the Lich King. Frostmourn's not too bad either if you've got the health to spare. I
think that's the main thing, isn't it? It's if you have the health to spare, because obviously if the board is clear, everyone's out of cards, the Lich King is insane. I'm not trying to doubt that, but in my experience, generally in this matchup, what you're trying to do in the later stages of the game on turns 7, 8, 9 is kill your opponent. It's Valinir, Argent Commander, Equality, Avenging Wrath, cards like that to finish out the game much quicker, rather than value tends to be more important, because as it currently stands, unless Xblyzes can find a way to get the board back now and very effectively, he will be taking too much damage from the likes of Blessing of Kings and Argent Commander, and Scruffy will just close out the game through aggression.
That's true. It is down to Xblyzes to try and get the board back now, and he's got to drop Gen, which feels awful, especially when we're looking at Scruffy's hand, which has 2 copies of True Silver Champion and a Blessing of Kings in. Pretty much anything he could want to deal with this Gen.
I really don't know if I can sympathize with this play of Gen here. There's so much that it is so weak to here. Like, Gen is the worst card in your deck. You play it for the reduced hero power. The actual body is absolutely dreadful. So here for Xblyzes, if it was Sunkeeper Tarim from his opponent, he is in a dreadful spot because he has no equality. If it was an equality from his opponent, that's really bad for him. Even just a True Silver here, there's so much that he's very, very vulnerable to indeed. However, with the exact way it worked out, because there was no kind of buff effect through Tarim or Blessing of Kings available to come down in the mana cost for Scruffy, Xblyzes has set up an even stronger Consecration in a way that I really did not anticipate would be happening.
But Scruffy is still going to end up ahead on the board. He's got the True Silver Champion down.
That's fair.
That can make short work of the Direwolf if he wants to go that way. And just dropping Argent Commander on the board doesn't look too bad either. It's not ideal when leaving a 1/1 alive to pop the Divine Shield, but yeah, I mean, you want to be ahead on the board. You want to put these things down.
Yeah, you absolutely do. But, man, situations like this, you have to start being very afraid, because having minions on board, like, when your opponent has so many strong reactive answers in the form of Jugglers, Consecrations, and Avenging Wraths, you know, there has to be a point to having minions on board. If they're just being cleared off every turn by the board clears, what is it actually doing? Because you're taking damage in the process through the likes of Avenging Wrath and things like that. Scruffy has to make a minion stick so that he can get these buffs going with Blessing of Kings and Valinir.
Victory or death.
So Scruffy is, he's just going to clear the entire board. Does it the way in which it takes less damage, obviously trading the 4/2 into the Direwolf first. True Silver going into the 1/1, but that's a very defensive play there. And now Avenging Wrath, as you pointed out, is just going to annihilate this board most of the time. Okay, annihilate the board. Dealing some damage to Scruffy, but again, giving Scruffy the initiative.
Right, and this is the point I was going to make with Xblyzes play, because going for Gen Greymane on your turn 6, when your opponent is heading into turn 7, and they have a board, Hero Power Tarim would have won Scruffy the game pretty much on the spot there. And for Xblyzes, if he'd gone for his own Avenging Wrath on turn 6, when his opponent had a decent little board, he then still has a threat to play on the board afterwards in the form of Gen Greymane, whereas in this scenario, he really doesn't have any threats. Like, he had to find Argent Commander there to really have any kind of a chance to push for damage.
Is this True Silver going into the 1/1? If so, that will be the 3rd hit in a row. No, okay. Xblyzes is on the offensive hit.
This is an offensive hand. You never win through value here. You try to close out the game in 2 turns.
So Ooze is going to shut down the True Silver Champion, and now Scruffy has to clear this, I guess?
Oh, yeah, like, I do not... What? He's not playing equality here.
Okay, well, doing it for the Argent buff, but it's not good because he's now on 11 health.
No.
We can see Equality Avenging Wrath in Xblyzes' hand, but
that feels dreadful. What are these equalities doing? You still had the mana to go Argent Commander and Equality. You always still get the buff on it. And you just send that damage to face. You send the forward Valinir damage to face.
You're right. I don't see how this game goes on long enough for Scruffy to ever use both of these equalities, so does feel like a wasted opportunity there as Avenging Wrath once again. It might leave something alive. Oh. Okay.
It does manage to leave something alive, but just imagine this scenario. You would trade one of these equalities for 4 life and 4 damage to your opponent quicker than you can imagine, every single time.
Now he's going to play the other one with Consecration, whilst I assume playing Blessing of Kings on his Argent Commander. So that does put Xblyzes down to 4. True Silver Champion in the hand next turn will be lethal.
However, for Xblyzes, if the True Silver does not come down, he's got so many chances for lethal. Had the hero already attacked on that turn?
I don't believe so.
No! What? 7 versus 9 is a huge break point. Like, if there was...
Both Avenging Wraths have been played, though.
Yeah, but you've got Argent Commander plus buff.
Blessing of Kings
or Argent Commander plus weapon.
Yeah, okay.
Like, there's so much that can come down here to mess this up. I've disagreed incredibly strongly.
And vocally, too.
Very vocally, with both of Scruffy's turns, the last couple turns here. He's still going to end up winning here, as there is no heal available for Xblyzes. Scruffy will be able to deliver that weapon through to face. Whether or not the juggler misses here makes absolutely no difference. And Scruffy goes up 2 games to 1 there. That felt to me, Falk, like a pretty shaky game there towards the end.
Yeah, I mean, I have to admit, I was enjoying watching the game and enjoying watching you very passionately arguing with the plays with that game. But I agree with the vast majority of what you said, especially at the end with the breakpoint, not hitting with the True Silver, getting that heal on. Yeah. Also, seeing Spellshifter appearing right at the end from Call to Arms. I'd missed that in the deck list. That was a little bit on the peculiar side as well. But now, Xblyzes has to play the deck that he did not want to play against the Paladin. It's going to be the Cube Warlock. Scruffy is looking to be, despite, as you said, a little bit of a shaky game last game, is looking to be in a great spot to win this series.
Oh, it's such a hotly contested point, because I would kind of agree with you. Like, the way the Paladin deck plays in the late game, where you're going for Equality, Avenging Wrath, Valinir, Argent Commanders as well, lots of damage pushing through. You can push forward a tremendous amount of damage, but I mean, even already, like, with Scruffy's play here, I think I disagree with this. In this matchup, you're not trying to go hero power 2-drop and then on turn 3, 2-drop hero power. Every single time, you want to go 1-drop, 2-drop, coin 4, be it coin True Silver, or in the ideal scenario, coin Blessing of Kings as the absolute premier option. This is just much too apathetic of a play, in my opinion. You're not pushing forward enough damage. It's not optimistic enough.
Yeah, looking to play the coin on turn 1, exactly. Oh man, what is the logic behind that? Knife Juggler means that as soon as a 1-1 gets played, then Defile kills it. He's going to end up just playing the 1-1. Okay, so... Xblyzes is now, especially with the Defile pickup, Xblyzes is looking to be in a great spot, but you do not agree with this Doomsayer.
No! Oh my god. Okay, so I was talking about the fact that you want to go 1-drop, 2-drop, coin Blessing of Kings. That's the best case scenario. Yeah. Scruffy kept 2 cards. You absolutely expect one of those to be Blessing of Kings. Therefore, on turn 3, you play the Doomsayer. That's when you go for it, because the counterplay against that is very weak. They have to go coin Spellbreaker, and if they're playing coin Spellbreaker, perfect. Your lackeys and Voidlords win you the game on their own. I think it should have been a tap there on turn 2 every time from Xblyzes. Right. Every single time.
That being said, Xblyzes kind of gets rewarded because a second Doomsayer has been picked up off the top. He does now have Defile as well, which will probably clear another board later on. And now, Doomsayer into Doomsayer is a difficult start for the Paladin to keep up with.
And I suppose, you know, Xblyzes' play of going for it on turn 2, it does still disrupt what Scruffy was doing, because he couldn't develop a 2-drop and therefore go coin Blessing of Kings, but it still would have allowed for a powerful turn 4. I don't know, it's worked out pretty well for Xblyzes. With or without the second Doomsayer, as we can see it, it still would actually have been pretty good there for Xblyzes. So maybe that was a slight overreaction to his throwing down of the Doomsayer there, because it did work out well, slowed down the amount of pressure being pushed forward. But the downside is, Scruffy actually overcommitted basically nothing, because it was just a Doomsayer played into a 1-1 and a Loot Hoarder was played into it. The amount of pressure being pushed forward, or the amount of value left behind for Scruffy in hand is tremendously high.
Xblyzes now has multiple options here. Going to go with the Mountain Giant. Skull of the Minari is a card that we've actually not seen an awful lot of recently in this tournament. Scruffy is running an Acidic Swamp Ooze, though you could make the argument that means you should play the Skull as soon as possible.
Yeah. So, what, 2 cards have been kept in the opening hand for Scruffy in the form of Knife Juggler and Beetle. Both of them are 2-drops, but neither of them have been played up until this point. That starts to set off alarm bells for Xblyzes. He's going to be starting to think of cards like Tarim, Valanir, maybe an Ooze to take out that Skull, because obviously we can see if the Skull was played there, Xblyzes wins the game pretty much every single time, because you pull out a Void Lord and then you go Cube into Pact. But he knows that if it is an Ooze there, that's the situation in which he very possibly loses.
Okay. So playing the Mountain Giant instead while it's still nice and cheap? Sure, okay. You don't like the Equality Consecration now?
No, sorry. Yeah, the Equality Consecration I like. I was, sorry, I know I'm kind of poo-pooing all the plays thrown down here. But the thing is, for Xblyzes, I talk about the reasoning to not go for Skull. If the Ooze had come down, he would be in a similar situation to the one he's in now anyway, if you get what I mean. Like, he doesn't have any defensive options, whereas the upside of playing Skull, if it works out, is you win on the spot.
Yeah, potentially. Now, Xblyzes has 11 health left. Scruffy, 4 damage on board, 8 damage available to him thanks to Blessing of Kings. Oh boy. Everything's going face here, right? Like, Scruffy is not afraid of the 8 damage on the board, especially as he still has a quality Avenging Wrath in hand, ready to go next turn. Yeah,
I mean, Cube Pact is scary, because not necessarily because of the actual bodies that it creates, but more that it's healing your opponent out of range. But like you say, if you're saving a quality Avenging Wrath on the following turn, this looks to me like it's very likely going to be leading to a win for Scruffy. Not in the way we would traditionally expect with Blessing of Kings on turns 3 or 4, or even with a Valanir or Tarim. But as it currently stands, it's still looking like he's in a good spot as another Void Lord is found. So even if a Lackey is found from this point on, he does not survive. Looking, however, at the ability for Lord Godfrey to save him, obviously on board with a trade and a play of Lord Godfrey, he could survive in this scenario with potentially even Dark Pact on his own Lord Godfrey, I think is the only way he survives on this turn.
That's insane, and he has to realize that as well. Like, there's so much on the board. He's down to 3 health. Xblyzes has to make the most defensive play possible. Nothing else is going to work, and there it is. He finds the play, trading in the Mountain Giant, putting himself back to 11.
Okay.
Suddenly, is this now winnable for Xblyzes? Call to Arms is about as good as a draw as it gets, with Knife Juggler ready to go as well.
Yeah, that is a fantastic draw for Scruffy. Basically, anything that forces damage through to face on this turn was pretty good. Another Juggler being found as well is very nice indeed.
2 more
Does need to think very carefully, however, about what he loses to in this scenario. If he makes a hero power, obviously more vulnerable to Defile. But is that 2 extra damage?
2 damage, Derek. It's 2 damage. He's got a quality Avenging Wrath ready to go in hand. Yeah, okay, Defile clears the board, but then what? Doesn't he win anyway if he hero powers?
Yes, the thing is, like, in that scenario, your opponent would have to Defile, play a minion, and heal, all on that same turn. Exactly. As Hellfire is going to be able to blow up the board here. However, we can see Scruffy with the Avenging Wrath here right at the end. A game of Paladin against the Warlock that I think from both sides could have been optimized, but Scruffy is going to be our second DreamHack HCT Grand Prix Tour finalist.
Amazing. That was some very passionate casting from you, Derek, there. Honestly, it's great. Cora, what did you think of that game?
It was... You know, honestly, not the best I've ever seen.
A little bit
Gonna be honest.
A little bit messy.
But I think that Scruffy can do better. And I think that Scruffy, we're going to have a bit of a break between this semifinal and the finals. I think if he can go gather himself, study up on Maverick's lists a little bit, and really just, you know, get his head back in the game a little bit. He's got a shirt on that says "Till the sun comes up." You know, maybe he was out a bit late last night, but if he can center himself, I know that he can do better than that, and I know that he can give Maverick a run for his money. So congratulations to Scruffy for being the second player qualified for our finals. He will be going up against Maverick, and the winner of that match will be our DreamHack Grand Prix HCT champion. But as well, congratulations to Xblyzes for making it to the top 4. That is no easy feat whatsoever, so he should be very, very proud of that. But Derek, I think that's the last we're gonna see of you today. Thank you so much for being here with us at your first DreamHack event. You can bring him back.
Put Derek back on screen.
Bring him back.
There we go. I'm back anyway. Hello, everyone.
How was the event for you, Derek? Did you have a good time?
Absolutely amazing. My first DreamHack here. The vibe with the players, all the other esports going on here, as well as the competitors themselves. A truly fantastic event. And I hope to see much more of DreamHack, either as a caster or just an attendant in the future. I think I've caught the land bug at this point, but not the flu kind, the I like
that
it
one
kind.
is going around.
Right, okay, I'll be careful.
We'll probably get the flu kind afterwards. We usually all do. It's not fun, but it's okay because it's worth it. And again, that was it for our second semifinal of the day. We will be back, guys. We are going to take a bit of an extended break, probably about 20 minutes or so, to let our finalists get ready, check out each other's decks, and really center themselves for this grand final. So much on the line for these two players, and we will find out who our DreamHack HCT Grand Prix Tours champion will be. So stick around, guys. The finals are coming up.